What is the imagination formula for abundance, according to Neville Goddard, and why does it hold the power to completely reshape your relationship with money, opportunity, and destiny? In this video, you will discover how imagination, not effort, is the true architect of wealth. How invisible thoughts crystallize into visible fortune, and how you can use the same creative law that built worlds to build your own abundant reality. This is where it begins. The realization that your mind is not a mirror reflecting life, but a projector shaping it. This is where it deepens, as you see that every coin earned, every door opened, every chance encounter was first conceived in imagination long before it arrived. This is the spark of awareness, that abundance has never been about luck, talent, or circumstance, but about conscious creation through inner vision. This is the hidden doorway, that every image you hold with feeling is a command to the universe, written in the language of vibration and faith. This is where truth breaks through, when you grasp that imagination is not daydreaming, but the divine act of creation itself. The same force that says, "Let there be," and watches reality obey. This is how it unfolds, when you dare to replace fear with faith, when you begin to see money not as metal or paper, but as energy molded by thought. This is where the shift begins, when you no longer chase abundance, but assume the state of the one who already has it. This is the moment of clarity, when the outer world ceases to be master and becomes mirror, faithfully reflecting your dominant assumptions. This is where the illusion fades, when you understand that what you believe in imagination must one day solidify in form. This is the moment it turns, when you stop asking how will it come and start living as if it already has. This is the unveiling of law, that consciousness, focused and feeling-filled, is the only true creative power in existence. This is why it matters. Because until you awaken to this truth, you remain bound by circumstances that never had power over you. This is the crossing point, between the old you who reacts and the new you who commands. This is where power returns, when you learn to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled and persist until it hardens into fact. This is the essence of Neville's teaching, that imagination, faith, and feeling are the trinity that births every form of success. This is where the promise unfolds, that by mastering your inner state, wealth becomes a natural byproduct of consciousness, not a struggle against odds. This is the revelation, that every wealthy person is, knowingly or not, a master of inner assumption. This is how your journey begins, with the understanding that the imagination formula is not a theory, but a spiritual technology for manifesting abundance in every corner of your life. Can you imagine discovering that the entire mechanism of wealth creation is already operating within you, quietly responding to your every assumption about life, money, and worth? This is where it begins. The dawning realization that Neville Goddard's imagination formula is not mystical theory, but a living law that obeys consciousness with mathematical precision. This is where the foundation strengthens, as you see that wealth is not achieved but received through alignment with the feeling of already having. This is where truth pierces illusion, because what you call effort is often resistance, and what you call faith is often fear in disguise. This is the turning point, when you stop working for money and begin working with imagination, the real creative force of the universe. This is how it unfolds, as every thought you persist in becomes a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious, destined to bloom into physical experience. This is where you realize that imagination is not pretending, but pre-creating. This is where the principle clarifies, that your inner world moves first, and your outer world must follow, no matter how delayed the reflection seems. This is where it deepens, when you recognize that every limitation you've faced was simply the shadow of an unclaimed belief. This is the spark of responsibility, that nothing happens to you but through you, and therefore you hold the key to change. This is how the unseen becomes seen, by assuming the emotional state of the result before any proof appears. This is where cause and effect reverse, because in the imaginal realm, effect comes before cause, and imagination precedes material evidence. This is where old beliefs collapse, as you understand that poverty is never a condition but a conviction. This is the illumination, that what you inwardly accept as true must express, for the subconscious cannot distinguish imagination from reality. This is the moment of transformation, when you finally grasp that believing is seeing, not the other way around. This is where courage arises, because to hold faith in the invisible requires strength greater than chasing visible forms. This is where the path reveals itself, through mental discipline, emotional consistency, and persistent assumption. This is how the bridge of incidents begins to form, seemingly random events aligning to confirm your new state of being. This is where abundance ceases to be pursuit and becomes expression, flowing through you effortlessly, because it was never missing, only unrecognized. This is the quiet triumph, when you understand that every fortune ever made was first imagined, and that same power now waits in you, ready to be commanded into life. Picture for a moment that the secret bridge between imagination and manifestation is not thought alone, but the living pulse of feeling that breathes life into every vision you hold. This is where it begins. The instant you realize that emotion is the electricity of creation, the invisible current that animates mental pictures into tangible form. This is where Neville's wisdom becomes living practice. Because without feeling, imagination remains only a shadow, uncharged and unrealized. This is the heartbeat of the formula, that whatever you feel deeply and consistently must express itself in your outer world. This is where truth softens into experience, when you stop trying to think your way into abundance and instead feel yourself already wealthy. This is where it becomes practical, when you learn to marry vision and vibration, to let emotion become the proof you no longer need to seek. This is the moment of ignition, when the inner picture stops being fantasy and becomes a living memory of a future already fulfilled. This is how it unfolds, as your senses, your tone of speech, your posture, even your breath align with the version of you who already possesses all you desire. This is where illusion crumbles, because once you feel it real, doubt loses its grip, and the mind begins to obey the heart's authority. This is the magnetic shift, when wealth begins to chase you, drawn by the vibration of certainty you now emit. This is where the unseen world starts to answer back through coincidences, inspired ideas, and effortless opportunities appearing out of nowhere. This is the alchemy of feeling, that what begins as imagination becomes sensation, and sensation becomes form. This is the test of faith, when you choose to persist in the feeling, even when appearances contradict it. This is where power is refined, because the disciplined imagination, infused with emotion, becomes unstoppable. This is the turning of the tide, when struggle gives way to ease, because you are no longer creating from lack, but from completion. This is where you begin to live from the end, not hoping for change, but feeling as though the change already occurred. This is where peace enters, because once you feel fulfilled, the outer must rearrange to match the inner serenity. This is where gratitude multiplies, because every moment spent feeling abundant compounds into greater evidence of abundance. This is the quiet miracle, when you discover that the world has always been listening to your feelings, not your words. This is how you finally understand Neville's promise, that feeling is the secret, and through it, you command reality to take the shape of your imagination. Now consider this. The most radical idea Neville Goddard ever taught was not to think about your desire, but to think from its fulfillment, to live mentally in the reality where it has already happened. This is where it begins, the departure from wishful hoping into conscious embodiment, where imagination stops being fantasy and becomes your new state of being. This is where the alchemy unfolds, when you stop asking, "When will it come?" and start feeling, "It is already mine." This is the threshold of mastery, where your mind ceases to chase results and instead inhabits the finished scene. This is the revelation, when you finally understand that your outer life is only an echo of your inner stance. This is how it works, because consciousness cannot remain divided. What you accept as true within must eventually appear without. This is the secret doorway. Living from the end means you no longer negotiate with time, for you stand where the wish is fulfilled and time bends to your assumption. This is the inversion of effort, because to live from the end is to stop striving and start being. This is where the illusion of distance dissolves, when you realize that every delay exists only in imagination's refusal to accept completion. This is where courage becomes calm, because once you feel yourself at the destination, the path must reveal itself beneath your feet. This is the law's elegance, that life mirrors your internal completion with external confirmation. This is how miracles appear, quietly, logically, as rearrangements of the world aligning with your fulfilled inner vision. This is where the ego trembles, because control is replaced by trust, and striving gives way to knowing. This is the point of surrender, not to fate, but to faith in imagination's unfailing power. This is the moment of shift when someday dies and now becomes the only truth you accept. This is how abundance accelerates, because living from the end bypasses doubt and plants you directly in the vibration of success. This is where consistency matters, holding the end scene steady even when appearances tempt you to waver. This is the invisible magic. Your mind rehearses fulfillment until the body, the world, and all of life conspire to match it. This is how Neville's students changed fortunes overnight, by stepping into their wish fulfilled and refusing to step back into waiting. This is the profound simplicity, that living from the end is not pretending, it's remembering who you already are in imagination's infinite realm. Suppose you discover that every thought you repeat, every silent dialogue you carry inside, is the architect of your financial destiny. This is where it begins, the recognition that your inner speech is not idle chatter but creative decree, shaping events with every word you whisper within. This is where awareness sharpens, as you catch the self-talk that quietly declares lack while your lips speak abundance. This is the hidden language of creation, where each inner phrase becomes a script the subconscious faithfully enacts in the outer world. This is where transformation ignites, when you consciously replace thoughts of struggle with the tone of certainty and ease. This is the inner revolution, learning to speak to yourself as one who already possesses, rather than one who is still seeking. This is where the old patterns crumble, because the subconscious cannot reject what is accepted in feeling and repetition. This is how the unseen machinery of wealth begins to move, guided by the steady rhythm of your internal dialogue. This is where you realize that prayer is not pleading but self-conversation in faith. This is the turning point, when you stop explaining why things are hard and start affirming that all things are working in your favor. This is how it deepens, as your inner words become tonally aligned with the joy of having, not the worry of wanting. This is the moment the atmosphere shifts, because sustained inner confidence radiates outward, attracting opportunities that match it. This is the refinement of mastery, when your mental dialogue no longer sabotages but supports your imagined reality. This is where illusion dissolves, because your outer experiences reveal themselves as mirrored thoughts returning home. This is the secret Neville hinted at, that wealth is not earned but spoken into being through assumption and faith. This is the soft power of the formula. Silent, invisible, yet strong enough to move mountains of circumstance. This is where persistence is tested, keeping your mental tone firm even when appearances resist. This is where you realize that wealth consciousness is built, word by word, phrase by phrase, feeling by feeling. This is the quiet artistry of creation, training your inner voice to speak only in the language of completion. This is how the imagination formula breathes life into prosperity, through the ceaseless, unseen conversations that define what you call reality. Envision a world where everything you assume about yourself becomes law, where belief is the sculptor and reality the obedient clay. This is where it begins, the understanding that assumption is not hope but acceptance, the quiet knowing that what you feel true within must appear without. This is where the invisible mechanics of creation reveal themselves, as imagination plants the seed and assumption commands it to grow. This is where Neville's genius shines, because he knew that the secret to abundance lies in assuming the feeling of wealth now, not later. This is where life becomes responsive, when you stop questioning if it will happen and begin living as though it already has. This is the heart of creation. That assumption clothes imagination with conviction, giving it form, substance, and inevitability. This is how cause and effect merge. When you assume a new state, life must reorganize itself to confirm your inner declaration. This is where illusion crumbles, because outer reality cannot resist the authority of inner faith. This is where the shift becomes physical, as your tone, your choices, your timing begin to align with the version of you who already possesses. This is the subtle alchemy, because the world does not change first, you do, and then everything follows. This is where doubt becomes irrelevant. Once you understand that assumption operates like gravity, impartial and unbreakable, this is where persistence becomes power, holding your assumption steady until the bridge of incidents delivers your imagined end. This is the inflection point, when circumstances start to bend in your favor, not through effort, but through identity. This is the divine symmetry, that the outer must echo the inner, and the law never fails in doing so. This is where responsibility becomes liberation, because you no longer wait for luck, you create alignment. This is how wealth becomes normal, by assuming yourself to be one who is already wealthy, not someone chasing wealth. This is where resistance dissolves, because the assumed feeling of completion leaves no space for doubt. This is where mastery begins, when you hold faith through silence, confidence through uncertainty, and imagination through contradiction. This is the beauty of Neville's law, that what you assume with feeling becomes fact with time. This is the quiet certainty, that once the assumption hardens into reality, you will look back and see that every moment of belief was the act that made it so. Think of the moment when life begins to rearrange itself in mysterious, almost poetic ways after you've made a clear assumption of abundance. This is where it begins, the realization that manifestation is not magic but orchestration, an unseen intelligence weaving together the threads of circumstance. This is where Neville's bridge of incidents reveals its quiet genius, as life constructs a perfect, natural sequence of events leading from your current state to your imagined fulfillment. This is where trust is tested, because the bridge often appears chaotic, disguised as problems, coincidences, or detours that secretly move you closer to your goal. This is the unseen choreography. Every phone call, every delay, every stranger crossing your path is part of the invisible pattern set in motion by your assumption. This is where the mind learns patience, because once you assume the wish fulfilled, your only task is to remain faithful, not force outcomes. This is the artistry of surrender, allowing the universe to handle the how while you dwell in the already done. This is where logic trembles, because you start witnessing outcomes that reason alone could never predict. This is how confidence grows, through small confirmations that prove your inner work is quietly shaping the outer world. This is where synchronicity blooms, when the right ideas, people, and opportunities converge without your conscious planning. This is the living proof that imagination moves substance, that assumption writes the script, and life simply acts it out. This is where fear dissolves, because you begin to trust that the bridge, no matter how winding, always leads to fulfillment. This is how wisdom deepens, realizing that interruptions are not failures, but divine redirections. This is where the heart steadies, knowing you do not need to manipulate results when the law itself ensures their manifestation. This is the secret peace Neville spoke of, the calm born from certainty that what you have imagined must unfold in perfect order. This is the education of the soul, learning to read signs, to sense alignment, and to stay unmoved by appearances. This is where detachment takes root, because faith no longer demands proof. It simply observes as the proof arrives. This is where the bridge becomes visible only in hindsight, when you look back and see that every challenge was precision, not accident. This is how the formula proves itself, through experiences that remind you that the universe was never against you, only mirroring you. This is the quiet awe of creation, realizing that you never needed to chase the bridge, you only had to walk it with faith until it delivered you to your imagined end. Ask yourself what happens when you realize that your past, no matter how painful or limiting, can be rewritten through imagination until it serves your abundance, instead of sabotaging it. This is where it begins, the awakening to Neville Goddard's most liberating truth, that the past is not fixed history, but living memory, and memory can be transformed. This is where the impossible bends, because by revising what once hurt you, you change its emotional meaning, and therefore its future consequence. This is where healing meets creation, turning every regret, loss, or financial failure into a seed of wisdom and prosperity. This is how it works. by returning in imagination to a scene of limitation and rewriting it with the feeling of success, relief, or victory. This is where truth softens, because once the subconscious accepts the new version, the old event dissolves from its energetic influence over your life. This is where time becomes elastic. What was once pain now becomes the foundation for peace and expansion. This is where the alchemy deepens. As you realize that you're not escaping your past, you're redeeming it. This is where forgiveness transforms from moral virtue to creative power, because to forgive is to imagine differently. This is the miracle Neville promised, that you are not bound by what was, only by what you continue to remember. This is where you take back authority by editing your inner film until it matches the story of the person you wish to be. This is how abundance multiplies, because when the emotional charge of failure disappears, energy once trapped in guilt returns as creative flow. This is where fear loses ground, when your mind learns that nothing is permanent until you consent to it. This is the quiet revolution, realizing that imagination, properly used, can redeem years of struggle in a single night of vision. This is where your identity shifts, from victim to author, from survivor to creator. This is how emotional alchemy feels, when you replace despair with gratitude for how perfectly the lesson sculpted your strength. This is where revision becomes ritual, reviewing your day before sleep and rewriting every unwanted scene into something noble, complete, and loving. This is how new momentum begins, when your subconscious, cleansed of contradiction, starts projecting only prosperity. This is the unspoken blessing, that your future no longer carries the echoes of pain, but the music of possibility. This is the mastery Neville concealed in simplicity, that to revise is to resurrect the past, in harmony with the wealth and joy that now belong to you. Consider the possibility that everything you desire already exists, waiting in a dimension unseen, patiently responding to the strength of your faith. This is where it begins, the understanding that faith is not blind belief, but inner perception, the ability to see without eyes and know without proof. This is where Neville's wisdom pierces modern logic, because faith does not beg for evidence. It creates the evidence through unwavering assumption. This is where the invisible world becomes more real than the visible, for the unseen cause always precedes the seen effect. This is where courage is born, not from control, but from surrendering to the knowing that your imaginal act is enough. This is where life becomes a dialogue with the invisible, each act of faith a conversation with the creative intelligence within. This is how the unseen world answers, through opportunities disguised as coincidences, doors that open without reason, and timing that feels orchestrated by love. This is where the mind is purified, because every doubt, every fear becomes an invitation to return to the feeling of certainty. This is where faith transforms from effort to ease, when you stop trying to believe and start living as if you already do. This is the quiet paradox, that true faith begins where reason ends and miracles begin. This is how persistence is born, when you trust the unseen long enough for it to become visible. This is where faith becomes science, an exact law of consciousness that never fails to reproduce what is felt as true. This is where serenity grows, because when you rest in faith, outer chaos loses its power to disturb your inner peace. This is how Neville's teachings become practice, by training your imagination to hold the unseen scene until it feels like home. This is where the substance of things hoped for begins to condense into reality, drawn by the magnetism of belief. This is where the noise of the world fades, because faith has no audience. It acts alone in silence, knowing creation is finished. This is the inner sanctuary, where imagination becomes worship, and confidence in the unseen becomes your offering. This is where the law reveals its mercy, because every act of genuine faith moves mountains, whether seen or not. This is how abundance arrives, not as a surprise, but as the inevitable outcome of consistent inner knowing. This is the moment you understand why Neville said, "Faith is loyalty to the unseen reality, for what you are loyal to within must one day greet you without." Envision a world where the key to all abundance lies not in external strategies, but in the identity you carry silently within yourself, the self-concept that quietly governs every choice and opportunity. This is where it begins, the awakening to the truth that wealth is not accumulated but embodied, and that who you believe yourself to be dictates the fortune you attract. This is where Neville's insight becomes practical, because changing your outer circumstances begins with reshaping your inner identity, moment by moment, assumption by assumption. This is the turning point when you stop trying to become wealthy and start becoming the person who naturally lives in wealth. This is where clarity emerges, because your self-concept filters every experience, allowing only what matches your inner belief to enter your life. This is how alignment works. When your thoughts, feelings, and actions consistently reflect a prosperous self, the world rearranges to match. This is the hidden law, that your outer reality is never more or less than the reflection of your inner identity. This is where resistance fades, because trying to act wealthy without feeling wealthy creates tension, while assuming your prosperous self creates flow. This is where imagination serves as sculptor, reshaping your inner model of self until it naturally expresses as abundance. This is the spark of transformation, realizing that every limiting belief you carry about money is simply a false self-concept awaiting revision. This is how persistence solidifies power, by continuously rehearsing and feeling the identity of the wealthy person you wish to be. This is where courage strengthens, because living as your ideal self requires letting go of old images that no longer serve. This is the subtle magnetism, when your new self-concept begins to draw circumstances, people, and opportunities that confirm your assumed identity. This is the inner revolution, where mental and emotional alignment creates effortless manifestation without chasing results. This is where gratitude amplifies results, because the prosperous self naturally recognizes and appreciates abundance in every form. This is how Neville's method proves itself. Identity precedes achievement, and embodiment precedes acquisition. This is where freedom arises, because when you are wealth, you no longer depend on external validation. This is where the law acts invisibly. Your outer life is the faithful servant of your inner self-concept. This is the profound simplicity, that by becoming the self who is already wealthy, you dissolve all lack into manifestation. This is where mastery begins, holding the inner identity with conviction until the outer reality faithfully mirrors it. Now consider this: a state of complete rest in your fulfilled desire, where expectation and struggle dissolve, and the mind quietly knows that abundance has already arrived. This is where it begins, the revelation that manifestation is not forced but allowed, and that the Sabbath state is the inner condition in which your wish materializes effortlessly. This is where the mind releases tension, because when you dwell in the feeling of completion, resistance falls away and the world reshapes itself around your certainty. This is the turning point, when doing becomes unnecessary and being becomes the active principle of creation. This is how it unfolds. As your imagination stabilizes in the end state, every action, encounter, and thought aligns without effort. This is where faith matures, because trusting the unseen is easier when you have internalized the experience of fulfillment. This is where the alchemy works silently, turning expectation into evidence and anticipation into reality without conscious interference. This is the hidden strength, being able to hold the end scene with serene confidence while life orchestrates the events that make it manifest. This is where timing becomes irrelevant, because in the Sabbath state, all moments are already perfectly arranged. This is the art of inner surrender, releasing control while maintaining absolute conviction that your desire is fulfilled. This is where peace transforms into power, quiet, unseen, yet utterly effective in moving circumstances. This is how abundance flows naturally, because the inner rest communicates to the universe that you are ready to receive without resistance. This is the subtle mastery, knowing that persistence is not struggle but peaceful endurance in the end state. This is where the bridge of incidents begins to form, each opportunity arriving as if by orchestration, effortless and perfect. This is where inner joy amplifies manifestation, because the vibration of satisfaction attracts the outer expression of wealth. This is the quiet discipline, practicing stillness, rehearsal, and feeling as the principal tools of creation. This is where the mind aligns with the subconscious, impressions of fulfillment sinking deeply until they reshape behavior and reality. This is the secret of effortless creation. By living in the assumption of already having, the world has no choice but to conform. This is where Neville's teaching crystallizes. The Sabbath state is the ultimate demonstration that imagination and feeling, when combined in rest, produce miracles. This is the inner revolution. When wanting ceases, envision a world where every desire you feel is not random or trivial, but a message from your higher self, a divine compass pointing toward the life you are meant to live. This is where it begins. The understanding that your longings are sacred signals, guiding imagination to create the experiences most aligned with your growth and abundance. This is where clarity emerges. As you see that wanting is not greed, but a form of inner guidance, directing energy toward fulfillment. This is where Neville's insight illuminates, because recognizing desire as divine allows you to treat it with respect, attention, and imagination, rather than frustration or resistance. This is where action becomes inspired, because when desire is aligned with imagination, the universe begins delivering synchronistic events and opportunities that match your inner call. This is how the journey deepens. By listening to subtle cues, nurturing feelings of already having, and cultivating a persistent assumption of fulfillment. This is where doubt fades, because faith in the unseen works hand in hand with the guidance embedded in your desires. This is the hidden law, that desire is the signal, imagination is the tool, and assumption is the command that transforms longing into reality. This is where the mind learns trust, surrendering timing, means, and method to the unseen intelligence that organizes life. This is where patience strengthens, because knowing that every desire is a step on the journey allows you to move confidently even when results seem delayed. This is how the unseen orchestrates your path, through coincidences, meetings, insights, and circumstances that feel divinely arranged. This is where persistence becomes joy, because following the guidance of desire aligns you with your authentic abundance. This is the subtle art, distinguishing fleeting whims from deep, soul-driven impulses that demand attention and imaginative action. This is where your inner compass calibrates. Assumption, faith, and feeling combine to create clarity in the pursuit of fulfillment. This is where abundance flows freely, because when you honor desire as divine, resistance vanishes and opportunities arrive effortlessly. This is the refinement of creation, where imagination paints the map and desire provides the destination. This is the quiet revolution, learning to feel your way into reality rather than chase it externally. This is where wisdom deepens, because every desire, when properly assumed, contains the seed of your greatest growth and wealth. This is where Neville's method reaches perfection. The inner self speaks, imagination responds, and the law of assumption brings form to every longing. This is the revelation, that following desire with faith and feeling is not indulgence but the highest expression of spiritual and material intelligence. Picture for a moment that the single most powerful force in Neville Goddard's formula is not mere hope or occasional visualization, but the unwavering persistence of imagination infused with feeling. This is where it begins, the understanding that abundance is not summoned by a fleeting thought but by continuous, deliberate attention to the end already achieved. This is where resilience is forged, because the outer world may resist, but imagination, held steadfast, never wavers. This is the quiet discipline, returning again and again to the scene of fulfillment until every cell, every sense, and every thought vibrates in harmony with it. This is where doubt is disarmed, because persistent assumption creates a certainty that even time cannot erode. This is where the law of consciousness asserts itself. Repetition with feeling engraves the desired reality into the subconscious until it must express. This is how the unseen grows strong. Every imagined act, every rehearsal, every inward scene becomes a seed multiplying in the soil of being. This is where patience meets power, holding vision steadily while outer circumstances lag in their reflection. This is the turning point, when small, consistent acts of imagination outweigh frantic effort in the world. This is where faith matures, because persistent imagination eliminates uncertainty, replacing it with intimate knowing. This is the subtle magnetism. Your inner constancy draws circumstances that resonate with your assumed state. This is the alchemy of creation. Perseverance in feeling transforms thought into tangible experience without external struggle. This is where mastery reveals itself. through the discipline to imagine fully and feel deeply, regardless of appearances. This is where the mind and heart synchronize, making imagination not a mental exercise but a lived, continuous reality. This is the power of internal rehearsal, repeating the end scene until it saturates consciousness and saturates life. This is where reality yields, because the subconscious, persistent and loyal, rearranges life to match your inner state. This is the quiet miracle, where persistence is invisible yet unstoppable, silently shaping outer events. This is the refinement of Neville's teaching. Consistency of feeling, not frantic effort, is the engine of manifestation. This is the proof of law. What is assumed and persisted in cannot fail to appear. This is the revelation. Abundance is secured not by doing more in the world, but by imagining more persistently in the mind that knows it is already yours. Envision a world where money is not merely paper, coins, or numbers, but a fluid current of energy responding to the frequency of your consciousness. This is where it begins. The awakening to the realization that wealth flows naturally when your inner state is aligned with the vibration of abundance. This is where Neville's insight transforms perspective, because outer money is always a reflection of inner circulation, and blocked beliefs create scarcity, while expanded awareness invites flow. This is where perception shifts. Seeing money as energy rather than struggle removes tension and opens the channels of reception. This is the subtle magnetism. Every thought, feeling, and expectation acts as a current, attracting or repelling opportunities that match your inner frequency. This is where action becomes effortless, because when your energy resonates with wealth, opportunities present themselves without forcing or chasing. This is how the law of consciousness operates. Inner alignment commands outer response, and resistance collapses in the presence of harmonious vibration. This is where clarity emerges, understanding that financial freedom begins not with budgeting or labor, but with refining your mental and emotional relationship with money. This is the hidden dynamic. Negative beliefs and fear of lack act as energy leaks, while faith, imagination, and gratitude amplify the flow. This is the turning point, when you start treating money as a servant of consciousness rather than a master of circumstance. This is where abundance multiplies, because energy, like water, seeks the path of least resistance, and your inner state becomes that path. This is where discipline refines power, learning to consciously direct attention and feeling toward wealth rather than anxiety. This is the subtle art of flow, allowing money to circulate, receive, and expand without attachment or fear. This is where trust deepens, knowing that the energy of abundance cannot be denied to one who maintains inner alignment. This is where opportunities accelerate, because energetic resonance attracts what is compatible, turning ideas into income and connections into resources. This is where patience and persistence coalesce, because the law of energy responds consistently to steady inner vibration. This is the secret Neville revealed. Money is simply a reflection of your inner state, obedient to your imagination and feeling. This is where empowerment solidifies, because controlling your consciousness means controlling the flow of abundance itself. This is the invisible mastery, where external fluctuations matter less than the steady pulse of inner wealth consciousness. This is how prosperity becomes inevitable, through understanding, aligning, and sustaining the energy that money naturally follows. Think of the moment when you realize that clinging to outcomes is the very thing that blocks the flow of abundance, and that freedom arises when you detach from the how, the when, and the where. This is where it begins, the understanding that detachment is not indifference, but unwavering faith in the unseen reality of your fulfilled desire. This is where Neville's insight pierces struggle, because the tighter you grasp, the more resistance you create, and the looser you hold, the more effortlessly life rearranges itself to match your inner assumption. This is the quiet power, letting go of anxiety, expectation, and fear while maintaining vivid, persistent imagination of the end result. This is where clarity sharpens, seeing that control is an illusion, and that influence flows from the inner state, not external manipulation. This is how mastery unfolds, by holding the feeling of already having, while surrendering the timing, means, and process to the unseen. This is where patience becomes potency, because life responds to certainty, not coercion, and the universe requires no instruction beyond your assumption. This is the subtle alchemy. Detachment amplifies attraction, for the energy of expectation without tension draws circumstances naturally. This is where tension dissolves, because trust in the inner state eliminates the need to wrestle with outer appearances. This is the turning point, when effort becomes effortless and faith becomes action without strain. This is how synchronicities multiply. Opportunities flow to you unbidden, because your inner state is uncluttered by worry. This is the refinement of imagination, holding the scene of wealth with ease, letting every sensation of doubt dissolve. This is where joy becomes the measure of alignment, because detachment allows life to confirm your assumption without interference. This is the hidden strength, practicing non-resistance while maintaining inner reality as primary. This is where abundance enters naturally, through trust, inner conviction, and the calm authority of knowing. This is the quiet revolution, replacing struggle with certainty, desire with embodiment, and waiting with confident living. This is where Neville's law demonstrates itself. Control of consciousness produces far more than control of circumstances. This is the subtle liberation, learning to imagine freely while leaving outer arrangements to the law of assumption. This is where power flows inward first, because mastery over the inner world guarantees the orchestration of the outer world. This is the culmination of detachment. Peace and abundance coexist effortlessly, as life mirrors the secure, unshakable state you maintain within. Envision a world where wealth is not merely material, but a reflection of spiritual alignment, where abundance and inner fulfillment are inseparable companions. This is where it begins, the awakening to the truth that prosperity is a state of consciousness first, and that spiritual harmony attracts every external blessing naturally. This is where Neville's wisdom deepens, because the richest life is not measured in possessions alone, but in the quality of imagination, feeling, and awareness. This is where perspective shifts, seeing money, opportunity, and success as instruments for expressing your inner divinity rather than ends in themselves. This is the subtle law. When your consciousness vibrates in gratitude, love, and generosity, abundance manifests effortlessly in every sphere. This is where the heart aligns. The inner joy of being wealthy resonates outward, drawing circumstances, people, and resources that mirror this energy. This is how manifestation transcends effort, because the universe responds more faithfully to spiritual alignment than to frantic striving. This is where clarity emerges, understanding that outer wealth is only permanent when it reflects an unshakable inner abundance. This is where identity transforms, from someone chasing resources to someone embodying abundance in every thought and action. This is the bridge to mastery, where material success becomes a natural byproduct of spiritual coherence. This is the turning point, when generosity, compassion, and gratitude enhance your flow rather than deplete it, creating a circulation of wealth that multiplies. This is how the law works invisibly. The energy you radiate internally structures reality externally, like wind shaping waves. This is where freedom manifests. Wealth becomes a tool for conscious creation, not a source of worry or limitation. This is the quiet power of alignment. Your spiritual state governs the velocity and direction of abundance. This is the subtle art of integration, blending imagination, assumption, and spiritual awareness into a single, unstoppable current. This is where limitations dissolve. Material lack cannot survive in consciousness attuned to divine abundance. This is the hidden joy, realizing that inner prosperity enhances life far beyond what possessions alone could provide. This is where Neville's teaching becomes experiential. Spiritual practice and wealth creation merge into one seamless flow. This is the ultimate insight. When abundance is recognized as an expression of the soul, fear, struggle, and scarcity naturally fade. This is where mastery consolidates. Wealth, purpose, and spiritual clarity coalesce into a life lived fully in alignment with imagination's infinite power. Picture for a moment that everything you consume mentally, thoughts, words, images, and conversations, directly shapes the abundance you experience, and that your inner diet determines the outer harvest. This is where it begins, the understanding that attention and focus are like nutrition for consciousness, nourishing either lack or prosperity depending on their quality. This is where Neville's insight becomes practical. because sustained attention to wealth-filled ideas, constructive visions, and empowered self-talk creates fertile ground for manifestation. This is where awareness sharpens, catching the habitual thoughts that sabotage your abundance and consciously replacing them with imaginings of fulfillment. This is where freedom emerges, choosing carefully what you allow into your mind, refusing fear, doubt, and scarcity, disguised as advice or news. This is the subtle power. Mental diet is not repression, but selective cultivation of thoughts that strengthen your assumption of wealth. This is where clarity deepens, because your subconscious cannot distinguish between what you imagine vividly and what you read, hear, or repeat internally. This is how abundance flows, through consistent mental consumption that aligns with your desired state rather than conflicts with it. This is the turning point, when imagination becomes the dominant input, outweighing outer appearances, and the world begins to reflect the internal feast. This is where the law acts invisibly. Every thought absorbed and felt with conviction imprints the subconscious with the reality it must manifest. This is where discipline becomes freedom. Curating mental content frees energy previously wasted on fear or distraction. This is how results accelerate, because every affirming image, inspiring idea, and productive focus strengthens your internal resonance with abundance. This is where imagination thrives, nourished by a mental diet rich in belief, feeling, and vivid scenes of prosperity. This is the quiet revolution, learning to guard your mind as carefully as you would your body, understanding its role in creating life. This is the art of consistency, feeding the mind daily with the essence of having, being, and enjoying wealth already present. This is where outer circumstances shift, because persistent internal nourishment changes perception, attracts opportunity, and generates action congruent with abundance. This is the hidden key. Mental diet shapes reality faster than external effort or strategy ever could. This is where empowerment emerges. Your inner state becomes self-sustaining, no longer dependent on fleeting events. This is the subtle joy. Every thought becomes a deliberate act of creation, contributing to the reality you desire. This is how Neville's law proves itself, by treating your mind as the source, the seed, and the soil of all abundance. You harvest wealth as naturally as breathing. Can you imagine that the simple act of feeling gratitude can completely accelerate the manifestation of abundance, as if your appreciation opens invisible channels for prosperity to flow effortlessly? This is where it begins, the understanding that gratitude is not a polite response to what you already have, but a dynamic state that aligns you with infinite possibilities. This is where Neville's insight transforms practice, because the more deeply you feel grateful for your imagined end, the more real it becomes to your subconscious, and therefore to life itself. This is the turning point, when lack dissolves, not through striving, but through the quiet cultivation of appreciation for what is and what is coming. This is where energy shifts. Gratitude raises your vibrational frequency, harmonizing your inner world with the wealth and success you envision. This is how alignment deepens. When you live in the feeling of having received, the outer world rearranges to mirror that state. This is where patience gains power, because the universe responds more quickly to consistent feeling than frantic effort. This is the subtle law. Your heart's appreciation acts as an invisible magnet, drawing circumstances, people, and opportunities into perfect order. This is where the imagination ignites, because gratitude transforms abstract desire into a living, emotional reality that commands manifestation. This is where inner peace strengthens, knowing that expressing thanks affirms the law of assumption without resistance. This is how the bridge of incidents accelerates. Opportunities appear as if by orchestration, flowing naturally to confirm your imagined state. This is where joy multiplies. Every moment of sincere gratitude compounds the sense of fulfillment already present within you. This is the secret empowerment. By feeling thankful before the evidence appears, you invite life to conspire with your inner certainty. This is the quiet discipline, cultivating gratitude as a daily practice that reinforces the identity of a prosperous self. This is where focus sharpens, because attention directed toward appreciation amplifies creative power and reduces distraction. This is the unseen alchemy. Gratitude transforms ordinary circumstances into catalysts for manifestation. This is where resistance fades. Appreciation removes doubt, worry, and mental tension, leaving only clarity and faith. This is the turning of the tide. Your inner vibration becomes the beacon that life obeys without question. This is where abundance ceases to be effortful and becomes a natural expression of your aligned consciousness. This is the revelation that the atmosphere you maintain within determines the reality that unfolds without, making gratitude the cornerstone of all wealth. Ask yourself what happens when you realize that the imagination you cultivate today is not just shaping your present reality, but leaving a blueprint for your future, a legacy that transcends time. This is where it begins. The understanding that every vision, every assumption, every feeling invested in your inner world ripples outward, influencing not only your life, but the consciousness of others. This is where Neville's insight becomes timeless, because imagination is the silent architect of generations, creating patterns of thought, expectation, and reality that endure beyond the moment. This is where responsibility meets power. Recognizing that the mental images you sustain are seeds capable of nurturing abundance or scarcity for those who follow. This is how influence grows, through the consistent practice of imagining the fulfilled life, the wealthy state, the self already complete. This is where clarity emerges. Your inner world is a living script, and the stronger, more vivid, and consistent it is, the more enduring its effects. This is the subtle law. By shaping your imagination with precision, you are constructing the future, not merely waiting for it. This is where persistence proves indispensable, because the legacy of imagination is built scene by scene, feeling by feeling, assumption by assumption. This is where the mind awakens, understanding that thoughts, feelings, and beliefs act like echoes, returning as external circumstances and opportunities. This is the hidden alchemy. Every act of assumption, every rehearsal, every emotional conviction solidifies into reality over time. This is the quiet revolution. By investing fully in imagined fulfillment, you leave behind a consciousness of abundance that others can inherit, consciously or unconsciously. This is how alignment manifests. Your internal life becomes the template for what the world reflects. This is the turning point, when imagination ceases to be private fantasy and becomes public inheritance, influencing culture, relationships, and opportunity. This is where mastery deepens. By controlling the internal script, you shape not just your destiny, but the environment around you. This is where power meets legacy, because the mind trained to assume, imagine, and persist produces results that ripple beyond personal gain. This is how abundance becomes sustainable, anchored not in fleeting effort, but in the permanent imprint of your inner reality. This is the subtle joy, knowing that every positive assumption contributes to the world's evolving abundance. This is where faith multiplies. Each act of imaginative creation builds momentum, reinforcing the law of assumption. This is the profound insight that imagination, disciplined and directed, is the most enduring form of influence and wealth. This is where Neville's teaching transcends the individual. Your imagination becomes a legacy of possibility, prosperity, and conscious creation. Envision a world where abundance is not a destination, but a living, ever-expanding circle, where giving, receiving, imagining, and creating flow without end. This is where it begins. The understanding that every act of imagination, every assumption of fulfillment, and every expression of gratitude feeds back into the infinite current of prosperity. This is where Neville's insight comes full circle, because the law of assumption is not limited to personal gain, but to the endless reinforcement of abundance in thought, feeling, and reality. This is where the power of circulation becomes clear. Each imagined scene, each inner conviction, each generous act returns multiplied, sustaining and growing the abundance you experience. This is where trust strengthens, knowing that life's flow is infinite and that what is released in faith is returned in greater measure. This is the subtle law. Abundance thrives in a loop of belief, imagination, feeling, and manifestation that never exhausts. This is how generosity amplifies wealth. Giving from the sense of already having expands the circle and invites more into your life. This is where alignment perpetuates. Your inner state sets the rhythm, and the universe dances to match your consistent vibration of prosperity. This is the quiet miracle, because the more you imagine, assume, and feel fulfilled, the more the outer world reflects that limitless energy. This is where mastery reveals its elegance. Life becomes a continuous feedback loop, with your consciousness as both source and receiver. This is the turning point, when outer results no longer define your state and your inner abundance becomes self-sustaining. This is where synchronicity flourishes. Opportunities, resources, and ideas circulate in perfect harmony with your inner frequency. This is where resilience grows, because the infinite circle ensures that lack is temporary and abundance is perennial. This is how the law of assumption operates universally. Each fulfilled desire strengthens the cycle for the next, creating a chain reaction of prosperity. This is where imagination meets eternity. The scenes you assume today resonate far beyond immediate results. This is where gratitude and joy become catalysts. Each feeling of appreciation expands the circle and multiplies its power. This is the ultimate freedom, knowing that abundance is not a finite resource, but an infinite, circulating current accessible to those who assume and persist. This is the profound simplicity. By imagining, assuming, and feeling your fulfilled state, you enter a circle without beginning or end, a perpetual source of wealth and possibility. This is the final revelation. Neville's formula is complete when you see that the inner and outer, the giving and receiving, the imagining and manifesting, exist